we've tried on the academic side and the pracademic side, that's what they used to call me, to bring some materials to the table that can help both the city manager and the practicing emergency manager to have a common ground, to make common cause, so that they can work with the community for safety, for security, and to be prepared for emergencies, which inevitably happen. Who would have thought that a tanker truck catching fire would burn down the MacArthur Maze? I think if you'd gone to Caltrans 10 years ago and said, this is going to happen, they would have laughed. Because nobody factored in how very hot a burning petroleum truck would get. And asphalt, after all, is made of petroleum. So it melted. But nobody thought of that ahead of time. Now we know all about it. Now Caltrans is really aware and working hard on a lot of projects. Who thought about earthquakes shaking down road bridges until the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, when unfortunately a police officer lost his life on Route 1 when the bridge went out, and in the darkness he had no realization. You know, it was October and it was 5 o'clock and there was fog coming up off the river and he didn't realize the bridge was gone. So now Caltrans has retrofitted all of the crucial bridges in the state, and they're now working on the secondary bridges. So we keep learning lessons through the loss of life or through significant damage. But we'd like to be able to think about things a little more inventively. And what did they call 9/11? A failure of imagination. That's what the report is called, the 9/11 report. What's Katrina called? A failure of initiative. That's the name of that report. If we study emergency management from a more academic perspective, I think we're less likely to lack initiative because we'll be highly motivated, and we're less likely to fail in imagination because with training and exercising, we'll have a lot of opportunity to think about what might happen. And I don't believe in thinking about Godzilla rising from the bay. If it's something there's nothing we can do about, there's not a lot of point in worrying about it. But we know we have threats and risks here in our communities, and we are not really seriously looking at all of them. Right now, climate change is an issue, and it's very political, and I don't care about why you think it's happening. Some people think it's about human activity. Some people think it's a natural progression of the Earth's cycles. It makes no difference to me as an emergency manager why it's happening. In any case, it's out of my control as an emergency manager. But what I need to be thinking about is, what does it mean to me? All of our storm drains drain into some body of water. What's going to happen when that body of water rises 1 inch, 3 inches, 5 inches? Not during storm season, but all the time. What's going to happen when hot days, 104, 103, are not the anomaly once in a summer, but become, as they were in Moscow this year, days on end? 60 days of temperatures above the average norm in a community where nobody has air conditioning because 70-something is about the highest it usually gets in the summer there. And I say usually based on history, not this summer. So what happened in Moscow? They had no cooling centers. They had no plan for seniors. People had no way to cool off except to go down by the rivers or the fountains. And how many people drowned because they drank vodka coolers and then jumped in the water? And the answer is over 100. Is that an emergency manager's responsibility? Yeah, I think so. I think we need to be starting to work with others to think about, how do we educate communities for climate change? How do we educate communities for the changes in hazardous material profiles that we have in our communities now? Aren't hybrid cars wonderful? Of course they are. And they're run with batteries that are more likely to catch fire than an old traditional standard car. It's dangerous for firefighters. It changes their response protocols. It also is something communities should be aware of, because if you see a Prius on fire, you need to realize that fire is going to burn a long time and it's very, very hot. So what does that mean to the way you train your citizens in CERT about fire response? Do we teach them run up with your fire extinguisher and try to put it out? I'm personally not sure. I need some more information about that. And where am I going to go to get that information? Well, I'll go on Google, but I'll also call Wayne Blanchard and ask him, what is the FEMA Higher Education Project doing about this? Has anybody started studying this? Is there any college course that relates to this? What's the National Fire Academy doing? Because they're the first on the scene. So, in fact, the National Fire Academy has a group that's looking at what are we going to do with hybrid cars? What about compressed natural gas buses? What about hydrogen cars? These are all new technologies that are coming up that are going to be in our communities, parked in somebody's garage, parked in the garage of an apartment building. So how does an emergency manager keep up with all this? And the only answer I know is to try to stay with the educational opportunities that come up through CISA, through ICMA, through FEMA, to get the publications that are available. So many now are available for free online. You don't have to clutter up your office and litter up your home. You can get them sent to you as electronic documents and just download 1 or 2 articles that may be of interest to you. Store them on your hard drive for future reference. Maybe you don't need them now, but if you know these are evolving trends, you might want to collect a little information, squirrel it away on your hard drive or a thumb drive, and then when the question comes up in the next budget hearing, what are we doing about this problem? Instead of saying, oh, I don't know, I'll go find out. You can look really smart and proactive and say, I actually have some research on that in my office, and if you'll give me a week, I can send you a staff report. How smart will you look? What value added are you bringing to the organization? So it isn't just about job security, which is important, but it's also about doing your job and doing it well. On the other hand, DHS has come into our lives. I'm not real sanguine about DHS. That was not, in my opinion, a good development. And I was among several emergency managers in the country who fought to keep FEMA out of DHS over and over and over again. As recently as the last quadrennial review, which was just completed, we wrote position papers and white papers explaining why FEMA does not belong in DHS. I recently went to a conference where I heard a speaker who made a point that I think is very salient here, and that is the Department of Homeland Security was created to enhance Homeland Security because the Senate decided that intelligence was not being adequately shared among organizations. And based on 9/11, we now know that the FBI in Arizona knew something, and the FBI in Florida knew something, and the military intelligence people knew something else, and the CIA knew something else, but they never talked to each other. So there was no fusion of information. So 9/11 happened. So DHS was created. So which agencies are not in DHS? The FBI, the CIA, and the DOD. There is no Homeland Security in Homeland Security. It's simply an amalgamation of a lot of organizations that have something to do with emergency management. So why wasn't that put under FEMA? Why wasn't FEMA made the lead and these other agencies coordinated with FEMA? And okay, maybe the Coast Guard doesn't want to be under FEMA. They don't want to be under DHS either. But better coordination could have been possible. Bill Megovich, who in the 80s was our emergency manager and later was the head of FEMA Region 9, ultimately became the emergency manager for the Department of Transportation in the United States with Norm Mineta. And on 9/11, he stood next to Norm when they took the planes out of the sky. So Bill, while he was at DOT, created liaison positions to try to get networking going among the federal government. And if DHS can be a good networking organization, then it has some value. But that's not how it's being run today. It's run with a bunch of stovepipes with FEMA down on the bottom